Hello, East West English 10 students. My name is Miss Thomas, and I will be guiding you through today's lesson. Welcome to Week 2 of Online Learning. Week 2, Day 1. For today, our focus is how can we use focus annotation to determine theme and identify literary techniques, and how can we practice providing context in our writing. So please make note of your homework. It is to read pages 62 to 73. You also have some questions. We disabled it as homework number 5, but if you go to your worksheet, this worksheet will have your homework right here. This will be what you refer to for our lesson as we're looking through the slides. For your do now, you're actually going to be looking at this specific question. Without context, what does this text mean? So you have no other information. What do you think this text is saying? The text says, yep, I've got my knife. I found her. So take a second, think about it. What do you think this might mean? So hopefully you've taken a second, you've thought about what this text might mean without any context. And now let's get the context. Do you have an X-Acto knife on you? Miss Lou wants to scan a book, but she needs to take out the binding. And we have this text message again. It says, yep, I've got my knife. I found her. That came off more threatening than I intended. And my comment back saying, LOL, this message by itself could be interpreted very differently. So hopefully the meaning of this text would change based off of the background that you have. And I want you now to take a second, go to your Google Classroom stream and respond. What did you think that text meant without any context? What does that text mean now that you have that context? How does the meaning of what someone is saying change based off of the context or the information surrounding that they offer you? So take a second, fill that in, because this is going to tie into writing. When writers give context, when you give context, that can change the meaning of what you are writing. So considering for something as small as a text message, if it's taken out of context, it could have a completely different meaning, sometimes hilarious, and this was a real conversation actually. So think about that in your writing as well. How could the meaning change to something kind of funny, or how could it be not as effective when you don't have that right context? For today, we are going to start off with a mini lesson on quote introduction, giving some context before a quote. Going to have a small reading of pages 56 to 57. Then you're going to go to your page over here, your good old page where we're going to go through this mini lesson. Then we're going to read through this excerpt, talk about this, and then you're going to do your summary by yourself. The workshop is essentially us reading through this and figuring out the quote. So that's the plan for today. And it says write meal or super meal. You can just write meal. That's fine. Okay, so when you are integrating quotes, there are 3 things we're looking for. First, that you are supporting the point you make, that you are giving context, so you are providing information on the situation, and that your quotes are just long enough to get the job done and no longer. So you don't want to see a bunch of text from your quote and then none of your own writing. So here's an example of context and signal words. So with no context, we see the characters and the importance of being earnest do not take love and marriage seriously. There's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. So that's our bad example. And now we're going to look at with context and signal words. The characters in Wilde's play do not take love and marriage seriously. When Algernon explains his views on love and romance to Jack, he acknowledges the romance of being in love, but claims that there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal because it would lead to marriage. These 2 different examples use the same quote, but the context changed. We see a signal word over here, acknowledges and claims, and then also in the red, we see a little bit more context. We're told about Wilde's play. Yes, we have the same information about love and marriage, but we also have something over here explaining how when this person is saying this quote, this is what they're explaining. So rather than pulling out something larger, this context does the job for us. For your reference, these are some signal words, and on your worksheet itself, there is a portion where I have hyperlinked the lesson slides for your reference. So you can go back to slide 9, and this will be helpful for your summary. When you are integrating quotes, we recommend using square brackets. So if you need to add editorial comments such as who is speaking, use those square brackets. So the original quote says, during the conversation, he blew out his breath patiently. But maybe you want to quickly explain who exactly did this. And over here, by putting these brackets here, you can quickly say who exactly did this process of blowing out his breath patiently. Next are ellipses, and these are, I'm definitely saying it wrong, so apologies. And basically it's the ... If you need to delete something the author's written, use ellipsis marks. So the quote in context, although we learned very little about Scout's mother directly, Mrs. DeBose comments that a lovelier lady than our mother never lived, ... and it was heartbreaking the way Atticus Finch let her children run wild. So by doing this, you don't have to put a big, huge segment of text. You can minimize how much text is actually there. Lastly, a way to integrate quotes from different sentences. In the end, Born a Crime is not just an unnerving account of growing up in South Africa under apartheid, but a love letter to the author's remarkable mother, who grew up in a hut with 14 cousins and determined that her son would not grow up paying what she called the black tax. So rather than just having a big quote here, you see that the writer is going to now put a dash and say, black families having to, continue the quote, spend all their time trying to fix the problems of the past. End quote. Using their skills and education to bring their relatives, beginning quote, back up to zero, end quote, because, quote, the generations who came before you have been pillaged. So you see over here, you're able to express a lot of ideas. You're integrating and weaving these different quotes together. This would be awesome to see in some of your writings. And I'd recommend brownie points. And this shows me that you're listening to this video as well, bold the parts that you do this with, and write it in red. So bold and put it in red, just like these examples we show you over here. Okay, so you see a little message from me to Miss Abraham, so just ignore that. But you're going to look at your writer's toolkit. A view-only version will be available for you in the speaker's notes. I'm getting that from Miss Abraham, so it's going to be in these notes over here. These are your speaker's notes. Now we're going to read out loud pages 56 through 57, and as we read, we want you to figure out what is the theme. By describing the story of his first day in middle school, what lesson or message is Trevor Noah trying to convey, and also just annotate for literary devices. On your worksheet, at the workshop portion, we're going to be identifying central idea and your literary device. And I made a little typo, so I'm going to change that real quick. So let's read this. In my class, we had all kinds of kids. Black kids, white kids, Indian kids, colored kids. Most of the white kids were pretty well off. Every child of color pretty much wasn't. But because of scholarships, we all sat at the same table. We wore the same maroon blazers, the same gray slacks and skirts. We had the same books. We had the same teachers. There was no racial separation. Every clique was racially mixed. Kids still got teased and bullied, but it was over usual kid stuff, being fat or being skinny, being tall or being short, being smart or being dumb. I don't remember anybody being teased about their race. I didn't learn to put limits on what I was supposed to like or not like. I had a wide berth to explore myself. I had crushes on white girls, I had crushes on black girls. Nobody asked me what I was. I was Trevor. It was a wonderful experience to have, but the downside was that it sheltered me from reality. Maryvale was an oasis that kept me from the truth, a comfortable place where I could avoid making a tough decision. But the real world doesn't go away. Racism exists. People are getting hurt, and just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it's not happening. At some point, you have to choose, black or white, pick a side. You can't hide from it. You can say, oh, I don't pick sides, but at some point, life will force you to pick a side. At the end of grade 6, I left Maryvale to go to H.A. Jake Primary, a government school. I had to take an aptitude test before I started, and based off the results of the test, the school counselor told me, you're going to be in the smart classes, the A classes. I showed up the first day of school and went to my classroom. Of the 30 or so kids in my class, almost all of them were white. There was one Indian kid, maybe one or two black kids, and me. Then recess came. We went out to the playground, and black kids were everywhere. It was an ocean of black, like someone had opened a tap and all the black had come pouring out. I was like, where were they all hiding? The white kids I'd met that morning, they went in one direction. The black kids went the other direction, and I was left standing in the middle, totally confused. Were we going to meet up later on? I did not understand what was happening. I was 11 years old, but it was like I was seeing my country for the first time. In the townships, you don't see segregation because everyone is black. In the white world, anytime my mother took me to a white church, we were the only black people there, and my mom didn't separate herself from anyone. She didn't care. She'd go right up and sit with the white people. And in Maryville, the kids were mixed up and hanging out together. Before that day, I'd never seen people being together and yet not together. Occupying the same space, yet choosing not to associate with each other in any way. In an instant, I could feel how the boundaries were drawn. Groups moved in color patterns across the yard, up the stairs, down the hall. It was insane. I looked over at the white kids I'd met that morning. 10 minutes earlier, I thought I was at school where there were a majority. Now I realized how few of them there actually were compared to everyone else. I stood there awkwardly by myself, in this no man's land in the middle of the playground. Luckily, I was rescued by the Indian kid in my class, a guy named Tyson Pillay. And that's going to be the ending of that reading. To think, what was the theme presented in that passage? So you're going to write your theme or central idea in your little box on your worksheet. So for you guys, that's this over here. So write that down, and if you're lost, make a list of motifs first. So motifs are things that are repeated. Some things I think repeated were race, division, ignorance. So make a list of motifs and then pick one motif to turn into a theme. So stop, pause this video, make sure you write something in this box, your central idea and literary device before we continue. I normally have you guys share out some of your ideas, but we don't have that luxury today, so I'm going to just be sharing an example with you. When I look at this passage, and actually it's something that Miss Abraham and Mr. Jacobson noticed, there's some parallelism. So the actual structure of the writing is parallel. And specifically, I want to focus on anaphora, or repetition. So you see over here, I had crushes on white girls, I had crushes on black girls. So that use of repetition there is what I'm going to argue supports my central idea that regardless of if one is aware of division, and maybe I'd rephrase this, I just wrote this really quickly, division, or it continues to exist and impacts the world around us. So your central idea is this big life lesson, overarching claim, and then this is my device that I'm going to prove how this device supports the central idea and what I just read. If you are extremely stuck, you can go ahead and use my example. Otherwise, and you will get brownie points and probably a higher grade if you choose to take this option, I would like you to come up with your own central idea and your own device, because when you take the Regents, you will actually have a writing prompt exactly like this. And if you're able to show your own central idea, your own central idea and device, that would be the best way to see if you're prepared for the Regents or not. Stretch, and to end off your day for English, you have summary. You also have a homework, so you have summary first. And for your summary, what you're going to do is in that same worksheet, you're going to write a meal paragraph explaining the theme of the passage, either the one I gave you, which is an option if you are stuck, or your own theme. Use literary device as evidence and integrate the quote into your sentence. So you're going back to those earlier slides where we say, have different sentences, ellipses, brackets. We want to see that, signal words. You can follow meal or super meal. Super meal might be even better just because we can see more examples of that. So clear topic, sentence, evidence, analysis, and link. And in your worksheet, you have a section for that. Highlight when you do this in your writing. Make it super clear to me, and like I mentioned before, maybe you want to put some of it in a maroon color and bold it as well so that I know that you did this. And just have it over here. And after you complete that, you can move on to your reading. It's not that long, just page 62 to 73. Chapter prologue and second girl. And then these are 3 questions. Describe Patricia's upbringing. How did Trevor's life change when he and his mother moved to Eden Park? And what kinds of things does Patricia do to fulfill her desire? I'm going to give you everything I never had. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to send us an email. I personally have some office hours for those of you in my period 3 and 8 class. Let me know if you have any questions, and enjoy the rest of your days.